Welcome to episode 233 of KT Confidential, the real estate podcast. Today, we find out if your realtor is messing up your deal. Howdy, friend.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm excellent.
Good.
Today's topic, I don't know what you want to title it. Is your realtor fucking up the deal? Or is your realtor prepared for a bidding war? Or are you a realtor and need some advice on how to help your clients win a bidding war?
Yeah, I mean, if you find yourself as a realtor or as a buyer constantly losing out on bidding wars, which is a thing now.
Not even constantly losing out. It's if you're getting into one, which is going to happen now because the market is low supply, higher demand, demand's increasing. You've got all of the big real estate companies now changing their predictions and saying, oh, the market's actually going to go up in the fourth quarter.
Right.
It's already happening real time in Southern Ontario. Bidding wars everywhere.
Here's the funny thing though with bidding wars. So it hasn't been commonplace for a while, but now it is again. But you know, when it was last year and for
16 months ago was the last time it was very prevalent.
I heard a story. My wife's extended family, somewhere different area, I don't even know where they are. She was complaining that she kept losing out on bids, but she was blaming it on the other bidders, right? She's saying, oh, these people are spending too much money. She's right. So her perception of the reason why she was losing and never buying a house and never winning these bids was because of the other people. First of all, I can't stand people who don't take responsibility for their own actions. But it's funny because, and I imagine that was, she felt that way because her agent was probably saying things like, oh, these people are out to lunch, right? So here she is losing out on who knows how many houses, and every house she lost out on, the prices are continuing to go up.
You made me add to my list now. So I'll kind of start. Yes. Okay, let's address what you just said. Sometimes you have as a realtor, you might have a difficult client or a buyer that's stubborn.
Mm-hmm.
That's the word I would use.
We experience it all the time.
All the time. I just got a text message from one of them right now. And then sometimes it's also because the realtor is being too passive.
Yes.
Afraid of upsetting the buyer or afraid of losing the deal altogether.
Or maybe afraid of their client overspending and not really having a true understanding of where the market's going.
Okay, so you're already going into some of my points here. But I'm going to start at the top. Tip for realtors. The communication with the other realtor is so important. How you start that relationship is probably one of the most important ways to get advanced in the bidding war itself, right? So as an example, if I have a client that's interested in putting an offer on your property, I'm going to call and I'm going to say, hey, it's Ariel Kormendy from Century 21 Miller. I showed your property yesterday at 123anywherestreet.com. And
we did a virtual walkthrough.
Yeah. And my client is very interested in putting an offer. I understand that your offers are being presented tomorrow at 7 p.m. and that you would like it registered by 6 p.m. Am I going to send the offer to info@anywherestreet.com? Yes. Okay, great. Can you tell me, is there anything else that I need to know for the offer or about the property?
Versus an agent who sends an offer and you've never heard from them.
Yes. Or versus somebody that calls, doesn't introduce themselves properly, doesn't say what brokerage they're from, doesn't ask any questions about whatever,
Yes.
So as an example, rental items. Some boards are very good about displaying it. The Toronto Real Estate Board never had an area for, they updated that recently, but they never had an area to identify rental items.
Right.
So us as the listing agents, sometimes we would get offers in a bidding war situation. This realtor may have not done their proper due diligence and now submits an offer with the hot water tank not listed as a rental item.
Yes.
Well, if you are the seller and the listing agent and you have 6 offers, do you really want to go back to that offer and say, hey, you screwed up the paperwork because time is of the essence?
Well, and a lack of confidence can ruin a deal.
Right. So that goes to my next part. So communication is number 1. First of all, speak clearly. Don't fumble your words. Don't sound like you're falling out of bed drunk.
Well, even that is okay, as acceptable if you're calling and taking the initiative to communicate. Because some people have a language barrier, and that is how it is perceived. So that doesn't bother me at all. For me, it's a matter of, is this person calling me, giving me a heads up? How does their paperwork look?
Right. So before we get into the paperwork, because you're going into a different direction now, the communication part of it also is, so I gave you that example of calling the other agent and saying, hey, I'm interested in submitting an offer on behalf of my client. I will be registering an offer. I always send a quick text after that call to open that line of communication.
Yeah, I do the same.
Hey, it's Ariel Kormendy from Century 21 Miller. Thanks for the call. I will be submitting the offer and registering it by 6 o'clock tomorrow. Please keep me updated if anything changes, blah, 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 blah. And that's it. And now they know who you are. And they've heard your voice. Maybe you had some mutual, like I always try and find some common ground, some chat, right? Like something other than business. I was at your open house. You guys did a great job, whatever. Proper paperwork.
Yes. So I've had many instances where we were in multiple offers. I was on the listing side of the equation. We were reviewing documents and there was a number of offers. And there's one in particular. So this one offer came in, it was actually substantially higher than the rest of them, but there was countless errors, things not filled in, things filled in incorrectly. And we had zero confidence in this agent's ability.
Oh, I remember. This was not that long ago, and your seller opted to take
they went with the
lower
amount.
price.
Yeah, which I commended them on because a lot of people can't get past the number. But we recently had a transaction where the buyers didn't come through with the deposit. We see that regularly. It's not uncommon. If
regularly is a little bit of a
it's not
stretch.
uncommon in the industry. I'm not saying for us necessarily, but if you don't have the confidence in the other party to proceed,
That's a legal document.
It is. But if they don't bring the deposit, it's going to be a hard battle.
No. What I'm saying is, as the realtor,
oh yes,
if you have the inability to fill out what you went to school and are licensed to do as a legal document in trading a $1 million+ value piece of real estate on behalf of your clients, and half of the shit is missing from the offer, as the listing agent, how confident am I that, first of all, this deal is going to actually close?
Right.
That your client actually knows what the hell they signed, that you'll come in with the deposit when you say you do, that you're not going to create
most people shortcut it. They have no idea what they're filling in. They don't know that you have to put certain units of measurement for the lot measurements.
Or no, it's not even that a lot of them don't know. It's laziness.
Well, laziness and lack of knowledge. They don't know what they're doing.
Lack of attention.
Yeah. Or they'll put city of instead of town of. And, although it may seem minor, these things can.
If you try and sue somebody and you send documents to the Ontario Court of Justice and you try and submit something and one line or one word is missing on certain things, they don't even file it.
Right. That slows everything down.
Right.
And when you're competing against other offers, that becomes a variable in their decision.
We're talking about bidding wars. Yes, because this is a heated discussion. It's what makes things interesting. You have 5 offers. Your goal as a listing agent is to negotiate the best price, terms, conditions, deposit.
Right.
That's what your job is at that point. Initially, your job is to get as many people looking at the house as possible, as many people through, get as many offers as you can. Once you have all those offers, negotiate it to the best of your ability to have the highest price, the highest deposit, the fewest conditions, and the best terms to represent your seller.
Subjective to the client, yes.
Yes, of course. You're doing everything in their best interest. Yes. So you have 5 or 6 offers, or whatever. There was a home a couple of weeks ago sold with 14 offers. They never got the deposit the next day. Right. So they could have chosen one of 13 other offers. The one they went with never even showed up with a deposit. You're not going to counter offer in very, very unlikely scenario that you would counter offer and sign back one of those offers while you're in that bidding war status. Why? Give you an example. So if offers are registered at 5 o'clock and being presented at 6, usually 5, 6 offers, you start at 6 o'clock and by 9 o'clock, you should have a deal wrapped up with some back and forth negotiation, whatever. So now what? You're going to counter offer one of them in the process and say, oh, you have a half an hour to get back to me with that? Sometimes it happens, but very unlikely.
It's rare.
It's rare. You don't want to be out of your control. And as soon as you counter offer, you're saying now this counter offer, I can't basically do anything else until you respond to it. So you're cuffing yourself, right? Handcuffing yourself. So very unlikely you're going to counteroffer. If the offer has mistakes, it is delaying the process in some way, shape, or form. So as an example with the hot water tank rental, if it's not identified on that agreement, now you as the listing agent have to go back to the buyer's agent and say, hey, that's missing and it's a rental. So can you add it, have your clients initial it and send it back? Well, all of a sudden, because the offer's been submitted and in presentation, that agent's clients went for dinner. And it just so happens they're having a couple glasses of wine and enjoying their evening because they think they're going to buy a house and they're not checking their phone because they weren't trained by the realtor or taught by the realtor that they need to be available during this time in the event something changes, blah, blah, blah. And an hour goes by and you, the listing agent, calls and says, oh, I thought you're going to revise that offer and send it back with the change of adding the hot water tank. Oh, I can't get a hold of my clients.
Had that happen.
Yeah. I sent it to them via DocuSign. I'm just waiting for them to sign. Well, excuse me, I have 5 other offers that are waiting for an answer and we're not going to wait any longer.
Yeah.
So, proper paperwork. I mean,
from spelling mistakes to inaccurately
spelling mistakes
being filled in.
The legal description. The entire legal description needs to be in there.
Oh, yeah.
Don't shortcut it.
I love when, so there's...
You mentioned units of measurement.
Yes. So that means on the
feet,
first page,
meters.
You have to identify the width and the depth of the lot, and you have to put what type of measurement you're using. So you have to identify feet or meters. And it's funny because some people will pre-populate these forms using some of the programs out there for real estate agents. And in many cases, the land or the property description, the legal description will show as CGO warehouse in the system. And people don't update that. So they really pay no attention to what they're doing. They click, okay, yep, click here, add these people, price, deposit, done. And they don't review what they're submitting.
Yeah. Or they use standard clauses.
Well, I had the offer. So the offer we accepted last night, or on Friday night, rather. Oh, sorry, Saturday night. It had a clause at the end of Schedule A, which is a very vaguely worded clause that said that the buyer and the seller will cooperate in changing the closing date if they decide to. Like almost word for word. So it was very vague. I'm like, well, no, like that means we'll agree to anything indefinitely. Like you could delay it for a year. And that was the only thing with this guy's paperwork that was off. And I called him about it. He's like, oh, yeah, I didn't mean to include that. Just we'll revise it and send it back. But, that goes to show, like, he wasn't even sure. He has probably a standard set of clauses, even though I can't imagine why that would be in there. And he just threw it into Schedule A, crossed off a few, and sent it in.
So on one of our other listings, we also had multiple offers on it last week. And the offer we ended up accepting had a clause in Schedule A where it said the seller is to provide a survey of the property within 7 business days. That's all it said. So first of all, I can't accept it because the seller doesn't have a survey. Right. In fact, there was probably never a proper survey done because a lot of builders will use a plan of subdivision or a survey that has several properties on it. So this just says, oh no, at the seller's expense. Right. So if my seller was to sign that, they don't have a survey. There was never one provided by the builder. There was never one done. Technically, she's signing off that she has to hire a surveyor to come out and complete a new survey. So it fulfills that clause, or that's technically a condition, even though it's not worded properly and doesn't have.
And if not provided, it's now becomes they're in breach of contract.
Correct. So we ended up crossing it off and initialing and blah, blah, blah. But something like that can mess up your deal if you're in multiple offers.
Yes.
So proper paperwork, make sure all of the documentation is there that's needed, proper spelling, proper clauses that are appropriate for that home. So if it doesn't have a finished basement, you don't have to talk about something of warranting the status of a finished basement. I see that all the time.
It's funny, I was chatting with my brother on the weekend because he's doing his courses right now. He's in his Sims. And he got into a conversation with the instructor because they were talking about the survey clause. And the instructor's like, he was very adamant, you must include the survey clause.
Yeah. And lawyers will say the same thing.
Yeah. So my brother questioned me. He's like, well, what if they don't have one? Because it's highly likely that they don't have one in their possession. He's like, well, then you ask them to get one. And he's like, well, that's really not that feasible because it takes 3 months and it's over $3,500. And he's like, well, he didn't have an answer for him. But in a lot of the stuff that's being taught to these agents is not practical. So they need to really get their feet wet and understand how it works.
Well, these courses in our part of the world, it's Humber College.
Yes.
Now, and there's 5 courses. And, I think they do a good job of preparing a realtor for a lot of the paperwork and legalities and just getting that base knowledge. But the blue collar stuff that actually happens on the streets when you're trading real estate is very, very different.
Yeah.
And not to say that it's not nothing shady or anything like that. It's just stuff that happens that is not taught in the schools. So yeah, that's a very, very valid example.
Well, and in many cases, if you are by the book and you insist on having conditions and things like that, in certain circumstances, certain markets, you will just genuinely never buy a house.
So that kind of is a good segue into the final point, which is value. So if you're in a bidding war, the seller is going to be most encouraged really by two things. Ultimately, the price and then the conditions.
Yes.
The deposit depends on the deposit, but usually people understand that a 5% thereabouts deposit is required, and you get that most of the time. Closing date could be one, but those two seemingly minor things in the big scheme of things. The price is usually the most important to most sellers.
Yes.
You as a realtor have to know what I call the intimate price of that home. What do I mean by intimate price? Intimate price to me means you have to fully understand what somebody in that very moment is going to be willing to pay for that home, given its location, its condition, its upgrades, its supply versus other. Like, what is the supply on the market of similar homes? What is the demand for it? And that's not even looking at what offers you're up against or how many offers you're up against, just knowing the market. So if a home is priced at $1 million and it's got 5 or 6 offers on it, and you know that you can speak in an educated manner to your buyer client, that because of the fact this home is on this street, and because they've got the beautifully finished basement, whatever it is, I can see somebody paying X for this home because of these other 2 sales and the way the market is going. Whatever. You have to be able to have that intelligent and educated conversation with all parties.
Well, and as a buyer, it's important to be of the right mindset, because it's funny how many times I'll have a conversation with a client who we're helping them with purchasing and selling. And when it comes to buying, it's like, oh no, I need to get the best deal. Like, I just want to work on trying to get the lowest price.
Yeah, let's put in an offer of $900,000. They're asking $1 million and there's 7 offers on it.
Right.
Yeah, but let's just try.
And then all of a sudden the conversation changes to, okay, now I can sell your house. Oh yeah, top dollar. It's like
well, sure, that's the only way people know how to negotiate, right?
Yes. But if they go into that mindset, they're never going to buy and they're going to be unhappy with the sale.
So the key there is, if you've got a good realtor that does understand the market, that does understand the positioning of the property you're trying to purchase, you have to take their advice and run with it. And don't be gun shy, don't be timid, because you're going to lose out. And in bidding war situations, when the market's hot, if you're losing out on this home, that home now sets a precedent. So if that home sells for $1,020,000, the next home that list is not going to sell for $1,020,000 if it's a comparable home. It's going to sell for maybe $1,025,000, maybe $1,030,000, maybe $1,050,000, depending on the supply. So now we're back up into that uptick. Now, this is just a discussion around multiple offer and bidding war situations, which we are currently in, again, in many areas and with many different price points and many different styles of homes. So as the market shifts and changes, yes, there's different strategies and different tactics and negotiation that happens. But in this current situation where and what's really happening is that there haven't been enough homes coming on the market, not enough people listing their homes. So the prices came down 27%. So I'm not going to sell. I'm going to stay here for another whatever. But now supply is low. Weather's nice. Mortgage rates have stabilized. People are getting confident again in the market. And people still need to move.
Well, you have to go into it being comfortable knowing that you may end up in multiple offers. And it's not unusual that a house that's been on the market for 30 days, as soon as they get one offer, another person that was sitting on the fence will come in with another offer and you're competing.
We're going to see a lot of that over the next 6 to 8 weeks.
Very common right now. So don't think that just because you're going after a house that's been around for a while, you're not going to be competing. You probably will. And you need to be prepared for that. And don't be afraid of it. Don't let it discourage you from submitting an offer on a house if there's already one on it. Or if another one comes in, don't back off. Just go in educated.
Actually, that I didn't even have it on my list, but I do want to talk about it real quick. Okay. It's a little bit off topic. Do you know what one of my biggest pet peeves is when it comes to multiple offers?
Oh, because I was going to say zippers that are too tight when you put it up around your neck. What is it though?
Next episode, I'm going to put on these KT vests, the one that you're wearing, and I'm going to zip it up. So for those of you that think we're crazy, we got these new KT vests in, and it's the type of vest that I would, oh no, it wasn't the vest. It was the Adidas jacket.
Oh, right.
It wasn't the vest. It was the Adidas jacket.
That's right.
So it's the type of jacket, I call it like a warm-up jacket. And I could see myself wearing it in the spring season, golfing in the morning.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And I would 100% zip it all up. And Adrian is looking at me and says, who zips up their jacket all the way like that?
Well, hey, last time we threw out a poll like this, so far, it had to do with saying nobody would live in their first house forever. So far, I'm winning that poll.
You're only winning that poll because all the old people are chiming in saying, I've lived in my home for 35 years.
How can a young person chime in?
I was talking about the market now, going forward.
Well, nobody will be able to know until they're old.
My great-great-grandmother died in the home she was born in. Fuck.
Okay,
so my biggest pet peeve in multiple offer situations is when a realtor will call me back, because we call all the realtors to say, hey, there's offers on this property. Your client's interested? Oh, they're not interested in getting into a bidding war.
Right. Well, what the hell are you doing?
Well, so newsflash, if you're not interested in getting into a bidding war, and you know, a lot of these people end up changing their modus operandi
inevitably
like a couple of weeks later, because inevitably that's the only way you're going to end up buying a home. But when the realtors become passive and they're like, oh, there's nothing I can do because my client doesn't want to get in a bidding situation.
Yeah.
Well, educate them.
Yeah. Well, in those cases, usually it's just time that does it, not their agent. It
doesn't cost you any money to put an offer in. So go all in. If the maximum you are willing to go is $1 million on that property, put that offer in, because you have no idea what the other offers are. Maybe the seller wants to sell it to a family like yours. Maybe you have a German Shepherd and the seller has a German Shepherd and they're like, oh my, it's going to go to somebody with a German Shepherd. We'll sell it to them.
It's a good voice.
Yeah.
Is that what you think German Shepherd owners sound like? Because you mocked me when I did an old person voice once.
You did an old person voice? I don't know.
You never know. And in this market, you just need to know what the house is worth. So have your agent do a market analysis and give you their range and tell you what you think it'll sell for.
You know, you say market analysis. I say know the intimate value, because
call it what you fucking want. It's the same thing.
No, it's not. Because a market analysis.
I'm referring to the same thing. You just call it something different.
You are looking at the sold and active comparable sales.
No, that's part of it. That's part of it. You still, basically, I look at it and say, okay, what would I expect to sell it for as a seller?
Yes, well, that's what I'm saying, is that a lot of realtors don't do that.
Right.
They do what they were taught in those Humber classes to pull up that's a whole other point on brokerages and how brokerages train you how to evaluate a property. But if you're not out on the streets, going into all the homes that are active, talking to the other realtors of, why did that home sell for that much? Did you go in that home? That home smelled like cat piss, or whatever.
And even the staging, like there's all these different aspects you have to look at. Like how would a buyer feel walking into this one versus that one? Was that home clean?
Did it smell good?
Right.
Was it well maintained? So all the caulking and painting and everything done. New floors. Oh, those floors were awful because it had cheap laminate and the laminate was bubbling or whatever. You got to know the intimate value of it. But don't call me and tell me your client doesn't want to get into a bidding war, because that really is them telling you they just don't want to buy that house, or they're gun shy, or they're afraid of something.
Yeah. Well, and that's the conversation I would typically have with that agent.
Yeah, it's the agent not doing their job, because
For sure.
now you're you are being passive to allow them to feel good about not, quote unquote, overpaying for a home because it had 4 offers on it. What if that was their dream home? What if that would have been the perfect home for them? And now 3 weeks go by, and because you were passive and letting them lead the way, now that same home is worth 20 grand more, 25 grand more.
Or wait, the worst conversation to have ever is after your clients do decide not to submit an offer, and then a week later you see it sold for a price they would have paid. That's a very uncomfortable conversation.
And pet peeve number 2? Okay, no, I won't even say it's a pet peeve. Realtor tip. Always have the discussion with your purchaser, your buyer client, in that kind of situation when you're in multiple offers and you know you have to put your best foot forward. When it comes to price, buyers will always say, okay, Adrian, that's my max. Let's say it's $1,025,000. As a realtor, you always should make it very clear and give them a little bit of time, but make it very clear and say, okay, Adrian or Mr. Buyer, if we find out tomorrow that the home sells for $1,030,000, it's sold, it's gone for $1,030,000, and your max was $1,025,000. Would you say, oh, coulda, shoulda, woulda? Would you be disappointed? Or would you say, if somebody was willing to pay that for the house, then let them have it and I'll wait for the next one?
Right. If someone says their max number, there's always room to move.
If I don't care what you are interested in buying when it comes to real estate. It could be a cottage, a condo, a $4 million home, a $4,000 rental property, whatever. If you find out somebody outbid you by a few bucks, you're going to be pissed.
Well, depending on how you feel about it. And if you genuinely feel like you would be completely happy, that's okay.
Exactly. That's my point, is you have to get to that point.
Yes.
And give your buyer client a little bit of time to just settle and discuss. That's why getting proper communication, proper paperwork, all in order before this all goes down. So if you're my buyer and offers need to be presented at 6 o'clock and registered by 5, I'm ready to go by 4:30. And then I know how many offers are coming in on this property. We can adjust on the fly if we need to improve our offer because now there's more offers or whatever. You just want to have that flexibility. But I'm always going back to you as my buyer and saying, if it sells for, I'm fine with your max at $1,025,000, but if you find out it sells for $1,027,000, are you going to be disappointed? And that's also after the discussion of now this home sets a precedent. So at $1,027,000, if I'm able to find you the right home that's comparable to this in this neighborhood, it's probably going to sell for more because we are in now a bit of an uptick in terms of price and supply and demand.
Well, and
blah,
for
blah,
the
blah.
realtor that doesn't want to be air quote pushy and ask their client to spend more money. I had a client once who hired us. And when they hired us, I asked, well, why have you chosen to work with us this time? And why didn't you call the previous agent? And the reason they had, and I've said this before, the reason they didn't call the other agents is they were upset that that agent didn't push them to spend an extra $30,000 to buy the house they wanted to, because had they have done that, they would not be buying a new house now. So even though I know this is very common for real estate agents or salespeople to feel that they don't want to be pushy. You're not being pushy. You're leading people to be successful in this transaction. And sometimes that means finding ways to convince them to spend the right amount of money.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're going to miss out and be resentful.
Well said.
All right.
Yeah. Well, there you go. So hopefully for those of you that are realtors right across Canada, I know we have a bunch of you following and listening. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you found any of these tips helpful. And if you're a buyer or a seller and you want to chat about this, leave us a comment. Make sure you like and subscribe. And we'll see you next week.
Bye for now.
Thank you very much for watching or listening to 33 of KT Confidential. If you're a realtor, we want to know what you think. Leave a comment below. See you next week.